All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Senator Sasha Renee Perez, and I'm very, very proud to be representing the 25th Senate District, covering areas from Glendale to Pasadena, Altadena, all the way out to Rancho Cucamonga, and areas like Alhambra and Monterey Park. And really excited to be hosting tonight's town hall and want to thank you all for joining us and tuning in to listen to this important discussion. I want to start off by just acknowledging the impact that we have seen immigration raids have on our communities. And that is a huge part of the reason why we are hosting tonight's discussion. We know we have heard from so many constituents from all across our district and even outside of our district who have had questions and concerns about immigration raids and about the impacts that this has had on our neighbors. And we want to make sure that we're getting you good information, that we're providing you with correct information and resources. Tonight, you're going to be hearing from our incredible Attorney General, Rob Bonta, who has been at the forefront of leading the fight against these discriminatory raids, as well as against a very challenging federal administration, as well as a number of organizations who will be joining us for a panel. And these organizations have been at the forefront of protecting immigrant rights and ensuring that our immigrant communities have the services that they need. And I will go ahead and go over our panelists that we have with us today. If we could go to our next slide. Our tonight's panelists include Angelica Salas, who is the executive director of CHIRLA. It includes Mohammed Taysar, who is a senior staff attorney with the ACLU. It also includes Ronette Ramos, the VP of Programs for Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Southern California, and also Pablo Alvarado, the co-executive director of Endalon, or the National Day Laborers Network. Very important organizations who are really at the forefront of this fight and to protect our immigrant communities across California and frankly, all around the country. I want to take a moment to really acknowledge the reason why we wanted to host this event and this conversation. I think for many of you, especially those that are from my district, you recognize that just a couple of months ago in August, we saw the death of one of our immigrant community members in the city of Monrovia, Roberto Carlos Montoya Valdez. And Roberto Carlos died as a result of an immigration raid. And we have yet to see justice for his family, and frankly, have yet to see justice for the system overall. And I know so many of you have had questions about what occurred in Monrovia in particular, and we want to ensure that we are both honoring Roberto Carlos's legacy, as well as honoring his family. His family wants people to know that what happened was unjust and wants people to fight to protect immigrants just like Roberto Carlos. And so that is our purpose and really our goal here today is to stand up for our immigrant neighbors just like him. I want to take a moment to also acknowledge that our office has been at the forefront of passing legislation to protect our immigrant communities because of what we've seen across Southern California and frankly across the nation. We passed SB 98, the SAFE Act, just recently to require that families as well as students and school staff are notified in a timely manner if immigration enforcement is on or near campus. We've also passed legislation, SB 805, the No Vigilantes Act, to require that immigration enforcement identify themselves and when they are present and out in our communities, that they identify the agency that they are with, and that immigration enforcement officers cannot be deputized bounty hunters. That is now banned in the state of California. We're very happy to move forward both of these laws, and there has been a suite of other California policies that we have moved forward to make sure that we are protecting immigrants and protecting the rights of our neighbors. Now, I'm going to go ahead and transition our conversation to really focusing our time here with our Attorney General, Rob Bonta. And once again, want to thank the Attorney General for taking time to be with us today. As you know, our Attorney General has been in the fight to make sure that we are protecting California values each and every single day. He is no stranger to our California politics. Before this, he served in the state assembly and was a progressive champion there and has continued to just be at the forefront of so much of our legislative efforts here in California. I'm going to take a moment to now turn it over to our panelists that will be asking questions to our Attorney General, and we will go ahead and get started. And I believe our first question that we have is coming from Angelica Salas, the Executive Director of CHIRLA.
Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to be here, Attorney General. My question to you is, as we continue to be in the forefront of protecting immigrant rights in California, we have a lot of legislation that we passed in the past to protect immigrants, especially so that there is no collaboration between police and ICE, but also new legislation that we protected. Much of it, it's also been led by our Senator Sasha Renee Perez. And my question to you is, how will you make sure that there is guidance across the state about the policies that already exist, the laws that already exist to protect our community, and what will be the guidance to all our departments across the state in order to ensure that those laws are enforced. Not only have we now passed them, but now they will be enforced across the state. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Angelica, for the question. I appreciate it. I do want to first just say good evening to everyone who's participating. Thank you to all the constituents in Senator Perez's district, our shared constituents, I'll say. And for coming out tonight, this is what democracy looks like: being engaged, being focused, being active. And I also want to say to all of the constituents of California's 25th Senate District, you're lucky to have Sasha Renee Perez in your corner. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here. This has been a difficult 39 weeks. I'll say we've sued the Trump administration 44 times during that period, more than once a week, on all numbers of issues, including protecting constitutional rights like birthright citizenship and voting rights, to defending $168 billion in funding for California that Trump improperly tried to take away, to preventing dismantling of entire agencies and departments. And we will stay on it. We've also pushed back against deployment of the National Guard. We've joined cases like the very important one in the Central District of California in LA, challenging the unlawful racial profiling practices of immigration enforcement officials in the federal government. And new laws like those that Senator Perez and others have passed in response to what we're seeing on the ground are critical. And as Angelica mentioned, they are being rolled out. They are going to be the new laws of the state of California. So what are we doing to enforce them when they become law, and also to send guidance to departments and to the public to ensure full implementation and full participation. So first, I want to say protecting immigrants has always been a top priority for me as an elected official, certainly continues to be for my office. We're working quickly to provide clear guidance to all the relevant departments so that new laws can be put into practice without delay. And at the same time, we're working to release guidance to the public, available in multiple languages, so that everyone understands their rights, understands all of their protections under the law. As Trump was elected, and the period between his election and his inauguration, we did a whole series of Know Your Rights, Know the Laws of the state of California, including a very important one right now, SB 54, the California Values Act, which is a pro-safety and pro-trust law in the state of California, which prevents the use of state and local resources for being used for federal immigration enforcement. So we have done a lot of public education and reinforcement of the meaning of laws. We've worked with our departments to make sure that they are implemented appropriately. And as implementation continues to evolve for the new laws that have been put in place by this legislature, we'll continue to provide updates and support to make sure that California's beautiful diversity and our immigrant communities are protected and are safe, regardless of what comes from the White House.
Thank you so much, Mr. Attorney General. I believe our next question is coming from Mr. Pablo Alvarado, the Executive Director of Endelon.
Thank you, Senator. First, I want to tell you how proud I am of being your constituent. I live near the impacted areas of by the Eaton fire. I live in Pasadena, and I'm so grateful, not just for the response that your leadership and the response against the raids, but also the accompaniment of the families that have been impacted by the fire. So thank you so much for all the work. And my question to you, Attorney General, is the following. With the November 4 election approaching, there is growing concern in our communities about the chilling effect of if ICE were to appear near polling sites. What protections are in place, and what guidance can your office provide to ensure that AAPI and immigrant voters can cast their ballots free from intimidation and fear?
Thank you for your question. And let me just first start off by saying that every eligible voter has the right to vote, free from threats or interference. Intimidation at polling sites is illegal. And my office will act swiftly against any attempts to intimidate voters near polling locations. We're coordinating with local election officials to monitor polling sites and respond quickly to concerns. We have rapid response teams standing at the ready. Voters who experience or who witness intimidation should report it immediately to my office, election officials, or trusted community partners. The triangulation of sharing of information is always good. The more people who know, the better. And we will play our role to make sure we intervene to defend rights and guard against intimidation. Information and guidance will be available in multiple languages to ensure all voters know their rights. And again, just to be clear, polling places are safe places. And AAPI and immigrant communities should feel confident exercising their right to vote without fear. And we will help ensure that polling places remain safe places by doing everything in our power to monitor the actions of those who would seek to intimidate and protect against that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you, Mr. Alvarado, for that question. We have another question coming from our friend Ronette Ramos with the Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Southern California.
Mabuhay, and thank you, Senator Perez and Attorney General Bonta. It is truly a pleasure to be here. As we've noticed at AJ SoCal, many in the AAPI community are limited English proficient, which creates barriers in understanding their rights during enforcement actions. What steps can your office take to ensure meaningful language access for immigrant communities, both at the time of arrest and while in detention facilities, while very few, if any, speak any AAPI languages?
Thank you, and mabuhay. Everyone must have access to their rights in a language they understand, period. And during enforcement actions, individuals will be informed of their rights in their preferred language with professional interpreters provided. And in detention facilities, it's the law that qualified interpreters for AAPI languages must be available in person or via phone and video. All written materials, rights notices, grievance forms, complaint procedures must also be translated into the primary languages of detainees. So those are all important and needed and necessary requirements now. And I just want folks to rest assured that my office will continue to monitor compliance hold facilities accountable, partner with community organizations for support and education. We want to hear from you, those closest to the what's happening on the ground, to inform us if there's any violations or lack of honoring of rights, so that we can take action appropriately. Our goal is to ensure that every person understands their rights and can access them safely, including accessing them through their preferred language.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Ramos, and thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I have the final question, and it's one that feels very timely, especially in this moment. We've seen an increase in violence towards members of the public during immigration raids. Just a few days ago, I'm sure you saw the recent news that Richard L.A. was shot in South LA during a raid. And we know that that investigation is ongoing. In other cases and in other raids, we've seen these things result in death, whether it is Roberto Carlos Montoya Valdez in Monrovia or Jaime Alanis Garcia in Camarillo. What role does your office play in protecting members of the public? And also, what advice would you give to members of the public that may witness these events or have concerns about these events as to what we should do to respond and best protect ourselves?
Sure. And let me just first say, I'm seeing what you're seeing and feeling the way you're feeling around unlawful, potentially unlawful actions by federal immigration enforcement officials, use of force that seems excessive, violence that is harming members of our community. There's no doubt that this is terrorizing and traumatizing. And it's important that the laws be followed. The federal immigration enforcement officials, they may enforce immigration laws. And there are laws preventing obstruction or interference, but they need to do it lawfully. And so when it's being done unlawfully, whether it be with excessive force or false arrest or racial profiling or use of language spoken or location or perceived occupation in ways that are unlawful in violation of the Fourth Amendment, then those actions need to stop. And a very important case in the Central District of California, Los Angeles, was brought by the ACLU and their clients, and a federal judge found that there was unlawful conduct on the part of federal immigration enforcement officials with respect to racial profiling, and also there's an aspect of the case with respect to conditions of detention. And so those accountability actions are really important. Bringing lawsuits when rights are violated so that rights can be vindicated, so that orders can be issued, forcing compliance with the law. There's an Eastern District of California federal court order as well, providing restrictions and guardrails on what immigration enforcement can do after they had a raid that violated the rights of members of the public. Individuals who are harmed, who are the victims of constitutional rights violations by the federal government, can bring their own cases, and usually are the only ones who do have what we call standing, the ability to go to court to remedy the wrong. And so it's important for folks to stand up for their rights and go to court and sue the federal administration under, it's called a Bivens action, when you sue a federal official for violating your constitutional rights. And my team has a role reviewing different patterns and practices of conduct by the federal immigration enforcement officials, looking for the potential for violations of criminal law and investigating, learning the facts, applying the law, and taking action when appropriate if criminal law is violated. So there's a lot of different places and spaces where people who are harmed and who wish to see the unlawful conduct end can take action. But there's also quite a few protections that the federal government has under our system of law, where they can bring cases at times out of state court and bring them into federal court, or they have some protections like qualified immunity as a federal officer. So we need to be aware of all that, but it doesn't mean that ICE agents can go through our communities, terrorizing and traumatizing, violating the law, using excessive force and unlawful violence. That must be checked and it must be stopped. And there are roles that I have and you have and those who are the victims have, and we should all use the appropriate tools in the toolbox to push back and hold law-breaking federal immigration officials accountable.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I appreciate, what you shared and just highlighting that, we do have protections, and many of those rights that we have that are protected are not just at the state level. Many of them are at the federal level. And I think continuing to reaffirm that is so important. I know you have to wrap up your time here before we transition to the rest of the panel, but just wanted to turn it over to you in case you have any last, final words that you would like to share with our audience who is here tonight with us.
First, just great thanks to you, Senator. Thanks for inviting me, but also I told you this personally, just thank you for your incredible, passionate, authentic, powerful leadership for your district. What was said earlier by your constituent who was proud to have you represent them. I think all your constituents do or should feel that way. I've seen how hard you fight for them on all of the challenges facing them. So I'm proud to be here with you, standing beside you, teaming up. And I want to thank all of our panelists as well for your work, your ongoing work, and your partnership with my office as well. And most of all to the constituents here. This is how we achieve justice and create the change that we deserve, by being engaged, by being active, by advocating, by showing up. You could be a lot of other places tonight, with your families and in your communities, with your jobs, but you're here because you care. And that willingness to fight and willingness to be engaged is absolutely critical. People power is the most potent power that there is. You shouldn't feel hopeless because we're not helpless. There's a lot more chapters to be written in the story of California and this country, and you and me and us and we, the people, are going to write it. It's a government of, for, and by the people. And democracies thrive when people are engaged and active. They die in the dark with neglect, with apathy. So keep fighting, keep pushing. I just want to end by saying the three C's are really important right now, the three C's. And they are courts, crowds, and courage. Courts are places where I'm going and the ACLU and others are going to vindicate rights when they're violated and hold a law-breaking administration accountable and securing orders that prevent them from continuing to harm people that we care about with unlawful conduct. Crowds like on No King Day, where 7 million people came out in one of the biggest peaceful protests in the history of our nation, demanding better from our government, telling our government what we will not accept and what we demand is absolutely critical. We need to keep speaking up and speaking out peacefully. And finally, courage, and no stranger to all of you, but not obvious to everybody. There's a lot of bullying, there's a lot of intimidation, there's a lot of threats, there's a lot of targeting right now, including particularly those who push back and dare to have a difference of opinion than this administration. And it's important to have the courage to continue to speak out, speak your truth, speak for our rights, our freedoms, checks and balances, separation of powers, the rule of law, our Constitution, and keep fighting for that. We will have the last word, the people, if we keep fighting. And I'm very hopeful and optimistic that if we do, we will prevail. So keep pushing, keep fighting. I'll keep pushing and fighting right by your side. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you so much, Mr. H.E., and thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, Senator. See you soon.
Excellent. So we are now going to go ahead and continue on with the rest of our panelists this evening. And once again, we have with us Angelica Salas from Chirla, Mohammed Tesar from the ACLU, Pablo Alvarado from Endalon, as well as Ronette Ramos with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Southern California. And really grateful to these folks for making time to be with us this evening. As you all know, these are our fighters out on the front lines defending our communities each and every single day. And it means so much that they would take time to come and answer our questions this evening. I want to go ahead and kick us off with a general question for you all, and we'll have Chirla start off our conversation tonight. What is your organization doing to keep our immigrant community safe, to keep the public safe as we see roving raids all across California?
Thank you so much. And again, I too echo Pablo's words as you are my representative too. Thank you for your incredible leadership on all of these issues. So the first thing that I think I really want to express is Cheerlead's mission is to create a just society fully inclusive of immigrants and to advance the human, the civil, the labor rights of our immigrant community. So right now, we're doing many things, but I'll focus on three of the things that we are doing. Number one, we are working directly with our families so that they understand that they do have rights in this country. Independent of your immigration status, you are covered by the Constitution of the United States, as well as local and state laws that protect you. And so we have done Know Your Rights trainings with hundreds of thousands of people across the state of California in order for them, for our community to know their rights, but also to understand under this context in which is so aggressive, how to exercise those rights. We're also working in these Know Your Rights workshops, plans of what we call prepare to stay. So these are family plans so that each family and each individual really thinks through, if I were to be detained, what would I do? Who would I call? And many times we're actually doing through our legal services, also doing consultations with individuals so that they understand what possibilities they have to remedy a particular immigration status, but also in case they are detained, how to make sure that there is representation that supports them. And so prepare to stay is from our vantage point of really putting a stake on the ground that we're going to fight to stay in this country. In addition to that, what we are doing is we do run the Los Angeles Rapid Response Network that many of our organizations right here are part of. And so with the Rapid Response Network, divided into many, many communities all across Southern California, with over 80 organizations participating with over 1,600 volunteers, is making sure that we quickly respond to reports of enforcement in our communities. Since June 6th, we have had 2,155 confirmed sightings of ICE in our communities. We have actually, and this is only a subset, this is what we have received through our Rapid Response Network. We have also confirmed 851 instances where our volunteers have witnessed enforcement on our community. And I just need you to understand that in this short time, we have had a daily barrage of enforcement. So what do we do with our rapid response and of all of us who participated? Number one, we go and we document. The whole purpose of the Rapid Response Network is to make sure that our communities have access to support so that we can document what happened, but most importantly, we understand who was detained and that we connect with family members in order for the individuals to have the best chance in order for them to fight their case. The third thing that is important is that we're also working with organizations like Immigrant Defenders, Carecen, ACLU, Public Counsel, Andalon, and so many more, and of course, Asians Advancing Justice, in order to provide legal representation to individuals who are detained. Through our Rapid Response Legal Network, we've have names of over 1,600 individuals whose family members have connected with us in order to make sure that we provide legal intake for our families, that we, between all the organizations, we provide some level of representation to those individuals. And the last thing I want to say is we are winning in some of those cases where individuals have actually gotten representation from the multiple organizations that are part of this Rapid Response Network, and they are home with their families. However, and I know we'll get into this, what we're seeing is an extreme level of really making denying people access to due process, to support from the lawyers and the organizations that want to help them. And then I think we'll speak also more on this excessive use of force, so that we're also dealing with the consequences of arrests that are extrajudicial, warrantless, unlawful, but also incredibly cruel and violent. And so we're also documenting that and taking that to court. And in working with our partners right here in this panel, we're taking many of these cases to court. And that's the other way we're defending our families. And of course, working with you in order to pass legislation at the state level that protects our folks in schools and hospitals and in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelica, and appreciate all your work. We'll go ahead and actually, I think I see Miss Renette Ramos coming off of mute, so I'll go ahead and let you share.
Thank you, Senator Perez, and always a pleasure to be in a space with Angelica, Mohammed, and Pablo. Here at Asian Americans Advancing Justice Southern California, also referred to as AJ SoCal, we are the nation's largest legal and civil rights organization for the Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. And our role, like Angelica and Chirla, is to make sure our communities know their rights, but also to have trusted resources in their own language and that they are not facing this alone. At AJ SoCal, our first priority is to make sure folks know that we have a call services in 8 AAPI languages, in Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, Khmer, Thai, Vietnamese, Tagalog, and Hindi, plus English and Spanish. Plus, we also provide the 11 materials in 11 Asian languages because, frankly, language access is safety. And they connect to us and we connect them for legal help as well as community support. And I'm going to ask my staffer to drop our 8 in languages in the chat so folks in your communities in Rosemead, Monterey Park have access to that.
Thank you, Ms. Ramos. I know, Mr. Alvarado, I see you with your mute off. If you wanted to share a little bit about some of Endelon's tremendous work defending our immigrant communities as well.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for this conversation, Senator. Our primary constituency, the population that we serve is primarily day laborers, immigrants, and low-wage workers. And it's our mission is to materially improve the lives of people. I've worked with this population for over 3 decades now, with the day labor community in particular, and I have never seen the systematic persecution of our people the way it's happening. But I can tell you also that I have never seen the level of support that our community is enjoying despite the persecution. People from all walks of life have actually come to adopt Home Depots, adopt day labor corners, to come and bear witness, to document the cruelty. Because if, and I'm sure you have all seen that some of the polls indicate that the public opinion on immigration is shifting in our favor. Well, it's shifting because ordinary Americans have actually come out and document things and are showing the country this is what immigration enforcement looks like under this administration. This is the cruelty. And I want to believe that most Americans, most decent people, don't want to see men in masks with big guns like where they were going to a conventional warfare and in armored vehicles coming into the neighborhood. So we've gone beyond serving our organizing our immediate constituency, but we're organizing people that we never thought that we would actually organize. Some of them are employers of the labor, a lot of white Americans that we're talking to. And it's beautiful to see them coming to the day labor corners and befriending day laborers, knowing their names, learning to speak Spanish. This is happening everywhere. Obviously, it's not enough what's happening. And we're doing this at the same time that we're lifting up the spirit of people, because in the worst of day labors, what we're going through sometimes feels worse than the COVID-19 pandemic. And we need to make sure that workers not just know their rights, but that they have the will and the power to exercise them. And that is one of the most difficult things to do. But I am certainly very proud of the fact that Pedro Vasquez Perdomo, a very humble day laborer who is my neighbor, is the main plaintiff in the lawsuit to challenge the illegality of the raids that are taking place. And I can tell you that when he was released from detention, I could see his eyes and the way the trauma that he had gone through. And because he's become part of this struggle now, he's smiling, and I can see, I can see him now providing his testimony, sharing his experiences. And it's beautiful to see, because when humble people stand in the front line and speak out, that's when real social change takes place. And I know that the adversary that we're confronting is extremely powerful, and the way they're operating it's really ugly. I know that is happening, but in the face of all of this authoritarianism and rising fascism, I think we're building community. And to me, that's the antidote to confront these challenges.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mr. Alvarado. It is uplifting to always hear you share that perspective and the importance of uplifting our leaders and allowing for our communities to, to fight back and to advocate, right? Because that's what we can do by uplifting one another. I want to go ahead and turn it over now to Mr. Mohammed Taysar, who's here on behalf of the ACLU to share about the work that they are doing in this moment as well.
Thank you so much, Senator. I appreciate you all for being here, and I appreciate my my colleagues and friends for participating in this session, and in particular to you, Pablo, for those kind and really, I think, like, important words. I think all of us play a small role in a much bigger project, and that bigger project is one that I look forward to being a part of, for the rest of my days. So, just a brief sort of couple of words about what the ACLU is doing. In conjunction with all of my friends. I'm a lawyer and I litigate. My job is to be in courts and to file lawsuits against the federal government when they abuse people's rights. And that's what we've been doing at the ACLU. We've got a number of cases arising out here in California, and in particular in Southern California, challenging some of the worst of the abuses that we've been discussing here. So I'll just name 3 of them and give a brief kind of update on where things stand. The first is the case involving Mr. Vasquez Perdomo. That's a case that I'm working on quite closely with my colleagues at Endelon and Chirla and others, in which we represent individuals who've been ensnared in these immigration raids. And this was the case, if you all remember, that went up on an emergency posture to the United States Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, we initially secured a victory where a federal judge declared that what the government was doing was unconstitutional in the way that the government was prosecuting these raids and preventing people from getting access to lawyers once they were detained. And we secured that victory, but the Supreme Court, in the sort of unreasoned shadow docket order, took that victory away from us. I think the important thing, though, is that the case is not over. In fact, it's far from over, and I think we will win. In fact, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we have another hearing before the same judge in downtown LA, to get more permanent relief for individuals who are being detained in a dungeon in downtown once they're being caught up in these immigration raids. And our challenge to the raids themselves continues. And we look forward to continuing to build the record that has been developed by our partners at Chirla, at Endelon, and with community members, demonstrating just how striking and cruel and unlawful what the federal government is doing, at least here in Southern California. And this work that we have done here in SoCal, in LA, is actually work that's being sort of built upon across the country. There are now lawsuits in Chicago, in DC, in Alabama, everywhere, in which people are rising up and challenging these same practices that the federal government popularized in these raids that began here in Southern California in June, but they're like exporting elsewhere. And now we've just seen news just today about how some of this might be coming to San Francisco as well too. So suffice it to say that our litigation challenging these immigration raids continues, and we're continuing to do the work of building a strong case that we think will be sort of bulletproof and will make even the most conservative judges think twice about sanctioning the kind of really cruel and sort of racist forms of immigration sort of enforcement that we've been seeing out of the federal government. Just two more quick updates. A second case that we recently won an injunction on was a case in which we challenged the DHS's use of force against protesters and journalists and legal observers. We all saw it here in LA. Once people started amassing in response to these raids, what did they get met with? Tear gas canisters straight to their face, less lethal armaments, getting shot at, hit by cars, all kinds of really dastardly tactics. And we recently secured a court victory in federal courts in a challenge against some of those practices. And the last thing is we also secured a victory in the Central Valley, in which where the federal government was conducting sort of roving vehicle stops of agricultural workers, farm workers who were just going about their lives, basically feeding America, but the feds were based on race, pulling people over and detaining and arresting them. So we secured a victory there, and that case is now on appeal. So all that to say, there's lots and lots of work that's happening on the legal front to really push back against the worst of these abuses. The final thing I'll say briefly is that all of that, even though it's a lot of work from the perspective of lawyers like me who are doing all of this, is just really one small part of a much broader movement, of a much broader set of efforts that all of us are engaged in. And so the legal work is small, but it has to land alongside all of the community defense work that folks are talking about, the work of engaging community members with knowledge about their rights, the work of organizing young people, teaching young people about their rights and about like their role in society, the work of making sure immigrants, especially the most vulnerable sort of low-wage workers, have the supportive services that they need, legislation that protects people, all of that, the whole panoply of kind of advocacy work that has to happen, we're just one small part of that. And I encourage everybody who's listening today to get involved in all the different ways that are necessary to really make all of us feel safe and secure in our lives, particularly those of us that are the most vulnerable in Southern California. So with that, I'll stop and share again my gratitude for all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Tesar, and appreciate that those legal updates as well. It's always helpful and good news to hear. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question now, and I will have Mr. Pablo Alvarado from Endelon speak to this first. How can people protect themselves, their families, and communities during an ICE raid?
Well, I think that obviously knowing your rights is the first step, but we have to acknowledge also that whomever these individuals are, whether they are ICE agents or bounty hunters or any other enforcement agency, we know that they're not respecting those rights. But knowing your rights will actually help you build a case to defend yourself. And we're asking people, even if it is very difficult to um, bear the circumstances of the detention centers, not to give our adversaries the last word, that people need to stand up and fight and exercise their rights as much as they can. So we're encouraging families that when they have somebody in detention, that every day they need to talk to them and tell them, fight, don't give up, don't just because they do attrition, they do all kinds of things to corner people so they can sign their voluntary departure. We're asking people to stand up, to fight. That is the first aspect of it. Second is your community. You need to know your neighbors. You need to know by their names. In the case of the day laborers, I know because I worked with this community for so many years. If you go to a day labor corner, workers know each other by their nicknames, not by the names. You know, we're asking workers, hey, this is not the time to call each other by our nicknames. This is the time to know our real names. And we're asking volunteers to come and learn the names of people as well and document whenever there's an ICE operation, the people are there not to cause the situation get very tense very often. And in fact, some of the evidence we cases because there's a lot of that we cannot use it. So asking people to come and document the illegality and do it respectfully, peacefully, and safely way. Because these are the rights that we have, you know, make sure that we document everything. And as I said, if there's something that what's happening, you know, is this. We're asking people to continue protesting.
Uh, um, um, Apologies. I'm not sure what happened. I think Pablo may have cut out for a moment. I apologize. It looks like we may have lost him.
I'm here.
Okay, but I can hear him again.
So
Pablo,
I was
here we go. I can hear you perfectly now.
I was saying that we're asking people to continue protesting peacefully. And we're asking, for example, on November 1st, for people from all walks of life to organize vigils outside Home Depot in honor of Carlos Roberto Montoya Valdez and all those who have died as a result of this cruel enforcement. It's around the Day of the Dead. We're asking people to come out and do this because Home Depot is a corporation that has so much power, so much so that in Florida, some of the officials were considering to name a new detention center the deportation depot. Well, guess what? The corporation just lifted up the phone and asked them not to use that name, and they immediately dropped it. And we all know what happened during the tariffs fight. When they intervened, they carry this power. So we're asking folks to organize vigils on November 1st and demand that Home Depot issues a full condemnation of these rates because it's not just day laborers, it's their customers who are being taken away and their business is being impacted. We're asking that they close the doors, that they lock the doors, and that they do what many businesses are already doing, ask for a judicial warrant if they want to come in. We're asking them to contribute with resources to alleviate the suffering of the family, the suffering that the families are going through because of the cruel enforcement in the premises. So that's going to happen in November 1st. And hopefully people who are joining us tonight can actually go to visit our social media, our website, and join some of those actions. But get active.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarado. Does anybody else want to speak to this question of how can people protect themselves and their families and communities during ICE raids?
I'll be very brief because I think Pablo covered a lot already. I think the only thing that I would just add is it's really important. Again, exercising your rights under incredible pressure is really hard, but we're also asking people not to run and to run away from something scary. And when somebody's attacking you, it just is natural. So, but one of the things that we're finding is as people rightfully seek to protect themselves, that if they run, they're also chased. And what we're now dealing with over and over again at Chirla are individuals who've been so beaten. Uh, Legs broken, arms broken, wrists broken, all sorts of injuries. But then the other thing that we're finding is that when we're seeking to try to bond them out. One of the excuses that they're giving is that they ran and therefore they are a flight risk. And so one of the things that we're ensuring, because we need to fight back everything and we're being represented, and are fighting these cases around due process and just access to bond and everything, even as we are speaking here, these are the fights that we're, but it's important that we also secure people's physical safety. And so you don't have to say anything. We do say don't run because that can be used against you, but it's being used in order to hurt you and in order to also deny you the ability to return to your family and fight this case. So that would be, I would say, the one additional thing that I would want to add in this conversation. And yet I also understand that, you're being chased. It's just there's a natural reaction that any human being would have.
And I think I would like to add the family component, right? So preparation means having a plan, and I would rather have individuals be more proactive than reactive in this time. And what does that mean? That means like keeping important documents in a safe place, parents, updating their authorization or pickup lists for children at their schools. Also, maybe looking into preparing legal documents like a power of attorney or a bless you, Senator, caretaker affidavit so that children are protected if parent is detained. We are truly grateful for AB 495, which expands the caretaker affidavit and gives families another safeguard. And to plug AJ SoCal, I know we're putting this into action and we'll be having a family preparedness clinic on December 6th. To help families complete those powers of attorneys, those caretaker affidavits, and also working with passport applications for U.S. citizen children.
Thank you both. Mr. Taser, did you want to add at all to the conversation? Excellent. So we will go ahead and move on to our next question, and we will have Ms. Ronette Ramos go ahead and kick off our responses to this next one. What more can local and state agencies do to partner with community-based organizations to provide rapid response, legal services, and safe spaces for families when enforcement actions occur?
Thank you, Senator. Local and state agencies can play an absolute critical role simply by resourcing and amplifying the work that community-based organizations, what we're already doing on the ground. When a raid happens, families do not call a government office first. Frankly, they call the trusted organizations like Chirla, Andalon, AJ SoCal. that speak their language, literally and figuratively, because they know their neighborhoods. And to strengthen the rapid response, agencies can invest directly in the community hotlines, those legal defense funds, and multilingual outreach so that families have immediate access to help. Agencies can also coordinate better with us by sharing timely information, connecting families to services without the fear of immigration consequences, and designated safe spaces like schools, clinics, and community centers where families know they will be protected. And finally, partnerships should be sustained not only in the moments of crisis by funding ongoing legal services. Thank you, Senator Perez. I know you support that. Training and preparedness clinics, agencies can help us build that resilience before the raids happen. And at the end of the day, government and community standing together sends a powerful message that immigrant families in California are not alone, and our dignity and our safety will be protected.
I'll add, that was beautifully said, Ronette. Really couldn't add more. Add maybe one more thing, which is during this time, we also need more support around bond funds. All of us are working to support individuals in order to be able to come home. Many of them actually exercise their rights. We've had situations where there weren't even charges on them yet. I mean, there's a lot of situations, but one of the things that we're now finding is that the government is then issuing bonds of 1,000, 500. That's on the low end, but 5,000. We just had to pay a bond, and working with the family and many community-based organizations, $25,000 to bring a person home. And so it's really important that we keep fighting. And of course, our attorneys and everybody's working to lower those bonds. This is excessive. It's done on purpose. It's part of denying due process. But we do want to make sure that if after all of the challenges, we finally do get the ability to bring people home by paying a bond, it's important that they do, because as was said earlier by Pablo, the conditions in those detention centers are horrific. And I think we need to do more from government to actually hold these corporations accountable for the horrific manner in which they're holding our people. So if there's any chance for them to be able to be released from these prisons through bonds, I think that is extremely helpful. So I also ask many of you who are listening to support all that Ronette said, all that Pablo and Mohammed have added, but also to contribute to your local bond fund in order to ensure that people are able to come home.
Alrighty. We will move on to our next question then. What can folks do if they see ICE activity, and how can families locate loved ones that have been detained? What resources are available? And Mohammed, how about we have you kick off the response to this question?
Sure. I'll say one quick word, and then I think I suspect that the others here will have a lot more to say about this. I think I can tell you from the perspective of supporting the legal challenges, I think it's really important that we document as much as possible immigration enforcement actions, and to share those recordings with some of the organizations and rapid response networks and others that are kind of supporting immigrants. That I think is ultimately the most important thing. So if you're there on site, documenting, video recording what's going on, If you're a business owner that's affected, making sure you get surveillance footage immediately. If you're in the neighborhood, talking to as many witnesses as possible, getting their names so that we know who to contact if we need sworn statements and declarations and affidavits. All that stuff is incredibly important. Bearing witness, as Mr. Alvarado said, is incredibly critical. And that's part of the reason why when we build these cases, we have what the federal judge, at least in one of our cases, described as a mountain of evidence. That mountain of evidence is off the work of so many people who are bearing witness to what's going on. And I think that's ultimately very, very important for kind of accountability going forward. It's probably doesn't feel good that the only thing you could do is pop out your phone and record, and you can't actually get involved and help, because you shouldn't. But it's incredibly important nonetheless. And that, I think, is first and foremost the thing I would say the most. If you see something, say something. Record what you've seen and get in contact with some of the organizations that are present here. Perhaps get in contact with your office, Senator, and then let others sort of pick up the baton and go from there. So that's I'll start with that and turn it over to others for more thoughts.
Add that for Southern California to call our rapid response network 1-888-624-4752. We receive calls every day from on our hotline where people have witnesses of enforcement. It's as important in terms of right away documenting where you witnessed ICE presence or ICE enforcement, the streets, how many officers. All of these things are super helpful around enforcement. But to your question about how do you help somebody who's now been impacted, you can call this 1-800 number, and then we can also ensure that we connect and go back and actually talk to witnesses. And as was said earlier, find out the name and the person who had been arrested. Usually what we will ask is what's the first, what's the last name, and also what's the date of birth of that individual, just because some names are lots of people have the same names. So it's important that we have that. If they have an immigration case already, if they have their A number. The way to locate a family member is that you can go to the government ICE locator. So it's icelocator.gov. You can go and find out. It'll ask you the same information, but you can call our 1-888-624-4752, provide us that information. And through our many volunteers of attorneys, we will locate your family member. Unfortunately, what's been happening is individuals are being detained here in Los Angeles or in Southern California, but they're being sent throughout California, but also out of state. So in many instances, part of what we're working with families to do is locate their family member outside of the state of California, just so that we know where they are at. And then I would just say to everybody, it's important that you report that your family member has been detained. What we're finding as well is that there are lots of people who are lost in the system. And so we're doing visitation with some of the individuals, just so that if they don't have family members who are calling them or engaging, it's very easy to give up. And so it's also important for them to also know their rights. The ACLU represented us in a very important case around coercion in terms of voluntary departure. And we won a major settlement that said these officers cannot coerce you to sign away your rights while in detention. Of course, they're doing that, but many times what allows people to withstand that pressure of coercion is when they're either family that's calling, but also friends who could connect with them and engage with them, even as they are in detention.
And if I may add, Senator, we have to acknowledge that what's happening is very overwhelming. And there is no organization that has the ability to take on every single case. The lawyers that work for our organizations are exhausted. are fully overwhelmed. Just traveling to Adelanto every day is a challenge, you know. So we need to enlist private attorneys, and families, communities need to come together. The GoFundMe for the families are so important because that's the money that families have used to place the bond to release people, to get people released, and to make sure that families survive while their main provider, while oftentimes the main provider is in detention. It's been the case of so many families, you know, where people from all walks of life are donating because they care about our community. So we got to make sure that that every family has a plan to do that. And not just the families, but the building where you live. If there are like 40 units in the apartment complex, then talk to people there. And we're encouraging people to support each other because the reality is that, and this is the way I feel oftentimes, that immigrant communities have been abandoned by with obviously a very few exceptions by the political class, by the business community who just is willing to take the labor of people and benefit and enjoy it, but not recognize the humanity of people and invest in people. Oftentimes we feel abandoned by the press that has allowed this narrative, this false narrative about immigrants without challenging it. This is the mainstream media. We feel abandoned by the courts that more and more are leaning in a whole different direction. You know, so ultimately, we have each other. And that slogan of Solo el pueblo salva al pueblo should be very tangible in every community, in every family, in every neighborhood.
Mr. Alvarado, your words are just so touching. Honestly, just to add to what my colleagues have said, is that it really is that thought that people are not alone. Individuals, we are here. We have organizations who are fighting. Our attorneys are exhausted mentally, physically, every day, every hour of the day. At times, just it keeps going on and on and on. But we continue to fight because we are not alone. I too, I am very fearful. I just spoke on this. I am a United States born citizen. I am a civil rights attorney, but I am Morena. I am brown, and I carry my passport. I carry my passport. That's where we are at. And I would just say for folks to share their personal information with those closest to them, as Angelica said, name, birthday, a number. So should anything happen, that we can be as more proactive than reactive in that time of need.
Thank you all so much for sharing that. I think, you know, your insight just in terms of what folks can do, what resources are available, and what things I think everyday people can do, simply connecting with their neighbors, connecting with their family members, making sure that we have basic information and being prepared, I think is so helpful in this moment because these are all actions that we can take, even right now, with just a simple conversation. So really appreciate you sharing that. I want to go ahead and turn the conversation over to some questions that we've received in the chat box from folks that I know have been tuning in and have really appreciated this conversation. We've received so many positive comments, just sharing how helpful they've found this discussion. The first question that I will be asking, and I do want to highlight as well, we do have Damon Brown, Special Assistant to the Attorney General, who is actually on the call. We know that the Attorney General did have to hop off, but he is here to respond to questions on behalf of the AG's office, and is here to help answer those questions as they come up. The first question, and you'll have to apologize as the chat is moving. Comes from a college student. He says, first of all, I really appreciate all of the hard work you all are doing. I cannot express my gratitude enough for you all. As a senior in college, I'm unsure of how to involve myself in this type of advocacy in regards to immigration and speaking out against financial cuts to critical welfare programs. Do you have any advice for how college students who want to become politically engaged be able to inform others and advocate for our marginalized communities? And I'll let whoever would like to respond start off with responding to this question.
So I'll start because we have a very active high school program at Chirla, and so we work very closely with immigrant students, but also students who come and volunteer and are interns. And so we work with many high schools, many colleges, and so I just want to invite you, if you're interested in supporting our immigrant community and getting more politically involved and developing your own your own leadership, you can connect with us. I would just give you our number, 1-888-624-4752. You could also go to our website and look for the internship opportunities, www.chirla.org. And I know that all of us have internship programs, so I welcome your interest and your participation.
If I may add, look, the magnitude of the attacks, the threat that we are under requires that we do a lot of decentralized organizing. If you are in a high school, I'm sure there are undocumented students in that high school. Organize them, bring them together so they can not just know their rights, but mobilize. Similarly, in colleges, bring people together, educate, and the more decentralized that we do it, the better, because there's no way that we can face the challenge that we have in front of us without doing it that way. Like every person has to take responsibility, and anyone can be an organizer. And if you need assistance, there are many groups that can actually provide a basic training, and a lot of it you have to learn in your way. But this is the way we need. This is where we are.
Would anyone else like to add on to that? Any other advice?
I was just going to add on as well, as the mother of a sophomore in college and a senior in college as well. Thank you for already having the courage to want to fight. That is the first thing. And adding on to finding that internship, whether it is legal, whether it is policy, or organizing, go do it. Just go do it. Make the time, meet the people, be with the people, and speak out. Because as A.G. Bonta said, it's courts, crowds, courage.
Excellent. Thank you all for those answers. We'll go ahead and we'll move on to our next question that we have. And this one is for the Attorney General's office specifically, but free for anyone else to add on as well. It says, thank you so much for this timely and critical panel. Attorney General, and thank you so much to Attorney General Bonta and all our panelists. Well, there is so much to do here in our state. I am wondering what protections exist across the nation in various communities where officials may not be as prepared and or motivated as we are here in California. What efforts does our AG take or can take to collaborate with other attorney generals across the nation to help those states that may not have such a strong democratic system of protecting our immigrant communities in other states?
Thank you, Senator, for the question and for the audience that's here today. It's a very interesting question and one that sort of is part of the shifting landscape. Our office is working constantly with the other 23 Democratic state attorneys general in trying to fight for the protections of all of our residents. And at the beginning stages of this fight, after the new administration was installed in January, the courts were imposing nationwide injunctions when we would secure them, which ended up resulting in the wins that we were able to achieve being impacted or having an impact on states, regardless of whether their state attorneys general advocated and got into those fights. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has now issued a ruling that prohibits those injunctions from happening in many instances where we were able to obtain relief on a nationwide basis. And so, unfortunately, if you live in a state where your attorney general did not fight for your rights, is not filing lawsuits to advance the protections that we're all talking about today, then the residents of those states do not get the benefit. There are some rulings. One of the rulings had talked about class action lawsuits being a way for that to happen. And so it's sort of a shift in strategy. And so it's very important that people get with, obviously continue to petition their elected leadership in their states, but to work with groups like the ACLU and other organizations that are filing lawsuits on behalf of people everywhere, and having these class action lawsuits where everyone can get those protections. Our office is always willing to join what we call amicus briefs, or to file amicus briefs in cases, and that's how we support other states' residents, where private people, citizens, and organizations will file lawsuits, and we will file supporting amicus briefs explaining why these protections are important as a state with the largest immigrant population, to talk about what works here in California, and to hopefully persuade the courts in those states to find in favor of the positions that we're advocating for. And so we will continue to provide that support across the country, even in states where laws that they have on the books are being challenged and the states end up filing to enforce those laws. We will go in and also support in those settings. So I think we're certainly fortunate here in California to have Attorney General Bonta, who is leading these fights in many instances and willing to join fights across the country. But that support can be lent to those private lawsuits in those other states where their state officials will not stand up for them.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Does anybody else want to add on at all to Mr. Brown's response? All righty. We will go ahead and move on to our next question. And this is more of a general question. How can we see ICE agents that are violating laws? How can we see them be held accountable, and what accountability measures are there? Mohammed, if you would like to speak to this question.
Sure. Yeah, it's a difficult one, because the reality is that holding a federal agent to account for what they've done, particularly when what they've done appears to be the federal government's policy, is extraordinarily difficult. That said, it's not impossible. And the question that was put to the AG about what the AG can do about lawlessness from sort of federal government agents is a good one, because notwithstanding what these federal agents are doing, they're still bound by, local sort of generally applicable laws, like whether it's traffic laws or sort of criminal statutes or and all the rest of it. And certainly there have been state leaders across the country that have made no qualms about the fact that they would like to investigate these federal agents. The Attorney General just, alluded to that fact. Governor Pritzker in Illinois said that they are investigating these agents who are appear to be violating kind of state law. I mean, we had, here in in the Southland, we've had, agents literally shoot people, in an unjustified fashion. I mean, ordinarily that's attempted murder, and so so there are ways to kind of get at some of the really brazen lawlessness from these agents, at least from our prosecuting elected officials. Beyond that, it can be quite difficult. It's not clear to me, from my vantage point, what we can do to hold individuals specifically to account for their crimes and for their lawlessness beyond the threat of criminal prosecution. But certainly, what we can do is build cases against the federal government to hold them to account generally. And then the last thing is, whether there's accountability is multifaceted and includes sort of legal accountability, but it's also political accountability. You got to hold these folks politically to account, and you got to mobilize and do the things that we got to do every day to organize and basically get these folks out of power. Like that's also important too. And so I raise that as like at least some ways that we can think about really wresting control back of our communities from those that want to do us harm.
One other thing that I would just recommend, and I know it may not feel as though it would be effective given the current climate and administration, but there are oversight agencies for the federal law enforcement officers and federal agents. And so the Office of Inspector General, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, and even congressional oversight committees. Congress has oversight over these agencies. And while one may not have a great deal of hope, that the leadership in those agencies will be effective, anything that can be documented, any record that can be made, it is helpful to lodge those complaints. And so I would suggest as well that if someone felt comfortable making a complaint, to not completely abandon the idea of providing that information, particularly to your elected congressperson, as they can also exercise their authority as an oversight body to federal agencies.
Great, thank you both. We've received a couple of questions in regards to Home Depots, both folks wondering how they can get involved with agencies that are providing support to day laborers and organizations, and also questions about additional information for the upcoming vigil that was mentioned. Mr. Pablo Alvarado, do you want to speak to this question?
Of course. The vigils are on November 1st. And if you visit Home Depot, .org, you will find a map where these vigils are taking place. And if you want to organize one, please let us know. Visit our website, www.endilon.org. And we have all the information in our website. So it's not very difficult to organize a vigil. You talk to your pastor or the priest in the church or the minister, and you get 10 of your neighbors, and then you bring the candles. And it's very simple, and you denounce what's happening in those parking lots of those Home Depots. But please visit our website and join the effort.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Alvarado. I also received some questions in regards to a bill, AB 495, that I know Ms. Ramos had mentioned earlier. I recognize both, I think, Asian Americans Advancing Justice Southern California, as well as CHIRLA. We're both supporters of this policy. Could you both share a little bit more about this legislation and its positive impacts and benefits to the community?
So number one, AB 495 strengthens the caregiver affidavit that's been around for over 30 years. This is what it does. It gives parents the ability to name a caregiver that will take care of their child if they are detained and deported, or if something else happens. So this is not just for detention and deportations, it matters. But what it does is it strengthens parental rights in order to ensure that individuals who are deported retain those rights, but can also have a designated, it expands the number of individuals who can be designated as caregivers. And that caregiver can take a child to school, can take them to the doctor, and just make sure that that child is properly cared for. And we heard earlier that there are going to be workshops. We do these. We work with our families to fill out these caregiver affidavits in order for you to proactively think about who would take care of your child if you were gone. The other thing about this, about AB 495, is that it also further protects our our child care centers, as well as preschools. Just it creates additional protections for these areas in terms of enforcement and additional protection for those children. It is so important that we have the caregiver affidavit, because we wish that no child would have to suffer the consequences of their family, their father, their mother being detained and then being left behind or left alone. But that reality is that is what we are facing. And so what we are doing is making sure that parents have more rights and more opportunities to ensure that their child is safe and taken care of.
Angelica absolutely amplified everything. The traditional caretaker affidavit at this time is only 1 degree. So parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents. Other than that, so AB 495 expands outside of that. So it can go to non-relative extended family members. It can be the friendly neighbor who has been helping and watching over the children for the many years. It does not grant custody or terminate parental rights. I want to be very clear about that. However, it does help with the medical, dental consent, school authorization. So, but we appreciate that it has passed and that it has expanded.
Excellent. Thank you both. We have 2 more questions that I'm going to speak to before we wrap up. First, I know we had a question from an attendee about what is being done to prevent ICE agents from wearing masks or not identifying themselves during immigration enforcement. And I do want to highlight 2 bills, SB 627, which is the No Secret Police Act that I was proud to co-author, as well as SB 805, the No Vigilantes Act, which I'm proud to author. Were both signed into law by the governor. Both of those bills are now that they are signed into law, will be going into effect come January 1st. And it will be on both our local and state law enforcement to enforce both of those measures. I want to go ahead and take a moment to allow Damon Brown or Mohammed Taysar, if you have anything that you would like to add on to this, or really any of our panelists to speak to either of these legislation and the use of these bills and trying to further protect our communities.
I can just add again with gratitude to the senator for her leadership in this on this issue. The Attorney General's office is prepared to enforce state law. And so when the bill goes into effect, we will do everything that we are tasked with doing and making sure that the state laws are followed. And we also, as with any law that is passed, oftentimes we will issue guidance to law enforcement agencies and to other the general public on in how to comply with the law, providing some guidance on implementing what often are new obligations on law enforcement. And so as we continue to work with stakeholders, with agencies, local government agencies, that is something that could be a potential resource coming out of our office in advance of several bills that were signed by the governor this year that would require some form of guidance from our office.
Nothing to add on that. I think that was helpful.
Excellent. The final question I'd like to ask came from a community member who is actually currently navigating a challenge with a family member who's in immigration detention currently, and shared that her family has been having trouble with getting her family member medication, and what can she do, what resources are available, and she wants to know what some advice is in terms of where she should go for help and assistance.
I'll just say tomorrow, you have the number, call 1-888-624-4752. We would then connect you with some of our folks who can do some legal intakes. This is a severe problem, and I certainly want the AG to know, and representative. We have case after case of individuals who are not being given their medication. In fact, we're dealing with one particular case right now. Very similar, I read the question as well. So what we can do is seek to intervene. These are issues of life and death, where sometimes people's medication has been withheld. We had somebody who just had a brain operation. They were not given their meds, and so this is very important. And so please call, and then we would have somebody from our legal team seek to inquire. Providing when you call, the hotline will start at 9 o'clock. So call, provide your information, and we will do everything in our power to try to inquire about this particular case. And we're really prioritizing these medical situations just because we continue to see severe medical and health consequences because of just the lack of attention inside. Again, violations of these are corporations. Core Civic, Geo Group, Geo runs Adelanto. I don't know where your family member is, but this is unacceptable.
Thank you so much, Ms. Angelica Salas. I know that unfortunately this has been a very, very troubling trend that we've been seeing for our immigrant communities. Does anybody else want to respond or add on to that in terms of recommendation, advice?
I would just follow up just to say, when Angelica and others are giving out their information, I would just really, really encourage you to reach out to them. We work closely with all of the organizations that are here today. And just a couple of weeks ago, we're working with Chirla and with a situation where a young man was not properly detained in a hospital setting and compromising his health. And it was because they raised that awareness to us that we were able to get involved. They ultimately were successful in securing some relief for that individual. And so because these are situations that impact people's day-to-day lives on a minute-by-minute basis, pooling our resources together, working collectively, and our door is open to anyone who has information on any incident that is happening where intervention is critical and time sensitive. Please, I encourage everyone to utilize the resources of these organizations and our care office to let us know what's happening. So to whatever extent we can be involved, we're able to know about it and take the appropriate action.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. That is it in terms of our audience questions. I want to thank again our panelists for taking the time to be here this evening. And once again, want to reiterate to those that are watching, these are our fighters in the fight to protect our immigrant communities. I cannot emphasize this enough. These folks leading these organizations are doing the work each and every single day. And so for those of you that are interested in learning more, for those of you that need resources, for those of you that are looking for factual information, I encourage you to head to any one of their websites to learn more and to gain those resources. Also, just want to highlight as well for those of you that may be looking for questions about Know Your Rights, we do have our own page on our website. As well as our Department of Justice here in the state of California also has resources available as well. Our office is very proud and happy to partner with all of the organizations that you see on this call: Asian Americans Advancing Justice, CHIRLA, Endalon, the ACLU, as well as the Attorney General's office. These folks are out there doing the work each and every single day. We are so proud to be able to partner with these organizations on legislation, on resources, on events like these ones, to make sure that we are informing you of your rights. We're getting you all the information that you need. I want to thank you again so much for spending time with us this evening. This concludes our program. And if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to our office, to reach out to any of the organizations here. And we look forward to continuing to work with you all and serve you all each and every single day. Thank you all so much.